Have you ever felt like someone out there was meant for you, but you just can't find them? Like you're chasing a memory you can't quite hold, a name you can't remember, but your heart refuses to let go. Legend has it that there is a red thread that unites soulmates no matter the circumstances, but Mitsuha was losing hope, a connection that is extremely special. Mitsugi and Taki woke up crying, unable to remember what they had dreamed, but they felt like they had lost something, or that someone since that night. That night, the stars fell. It was like witnessing a beautiful dream. Mitsuha is a girl who lives in a town called Itomori. She is not happy. She wants to graduate and go live in the great, modern city of Tokyo. Her mother has passed away and her father is absent. He is immersed in his mayoral career. That's why Mitsuha and her little sister live with their grandmother Hitoha, who wishes to preserve the traditions of her ancestors. She tells them stories about Itomori and teaches them rituals, especially one in which the Deke perform a dance and then chew rice, cup it, and finally ferment it to turn it into a drink, which they then offer to the gods. According to belief, by chewing the rice, one impregnates it with their saliva and therefore leaves a part of their soul in the drink. One morning, news comes that a comet that fell 10,000 years ago will be seen in Itomori, and it will be the show of the millennium. Mitsuha goes to school, and her friends tell her that she behaved like crazy yesterday, but she doesn't understand why they were saying that. Her friends explained to her the day before. She was disheveled. She couldn't remember her name, and she was acting crazy. That seemed strange to Mitsuha. She couldn't remember exactly, but she thought she'd dreamed about someone else's life. Her friend said that maybe she was just too stressed out. Mitsuha said she wanted to leave the town. Everything was small and cramped. There wasn't even a cafe. That night, Mitsuha performs the serving ritual in front of many of her classmates, who make fun of her dance. Mitsuha was overwhelmed, shouting that she hates this town and this life, wishing she were a handsome boy from Tokyo in her next life. Be careful what you wish for, because the next day, Mitsuha wakes up in the body of Taki, a teenager who lives in Tokyo alone with his father and works as a waiter in a restaurant. Mitsuha is very confused, but she thinks she is dreaming, so she finds it fun to take on the role of Taki and was absolutely delighted by the city. Switching bodies forces Mitsuha and Taki to live lives they would never have chosen, exposing the limits of their own identity. It's about how we sometimes yearn for another life, another perspective, and what happens when we actually get to live it. She arrives at school and interacts with this guy's friends, and they notice that he is behaving very strangely. They go to a coffee shop until getting a message from work, where his friends help saying where the boy works at, so she goes to work, and her colleagues notice the same thing. Here, some criminals said that her pizza had a toothpick, of course. They were trying to get free food. However, Mitsuha explained that there were no toothpicks in Italian restaurants. The men got upset, but before something happened, Okudera saved her. Although that didn't prevent the objects from ripping the girl's skirt, when the restaurant was closing, everyone noticed. That's why Mitsuha didn't hesitate to fix her. Okudera was delighted and thanked him. He always picked fights, but she liked knowing about his softer side. At night, she spies on the boy's cell phone and learns more things about his life, including that he has a crush on her. Her superior, Okudera, immediately, Mitsuha, decides to leave a message for Taki on his cell phone, and her name, Mitsuha, is written on his hand. The next morning, the real Taki wakes up stunned upon reading the messages. He goes to school, and his friends tell him that he acted very strange yesterday, but Taki doesn't know anything. On her side, Mitsuha wakes up like her and finds several messages in her hand. Mitsuha, who are you? She is totally stunned. She arrives at school and everyone stares at her. It seems she behaved very strangely again yesterday, and then Mitsuha and Taki realize that they weren't dreaming, but that they actually exchanged bodies. However, the memories of the exchange are forgotten when they wake up. They feel like they were dreams. So, from now on, they decide to leave each other rules and notes about what they do to protect each other's lifestyles. For example, don't touch each other's bodies, don't be late, and don't spend money. Also, he would always write down changes on his phone. He, being Mitsuha, compliments her with his masculine side and makes her popular. An excellent athlete, sought after by everyone, she, being Taki, compliments him with her feminine side and gets him a date with his superior, Okudera, later. The Eastern philosophy establishes that there are two opposing but complementary forces that exist in all things, yin and yang, and Tao is the point of union and balance of these forces. According to this belief, life should be a balance between opposites, since an excess or absence of one of the parts would be harmful. This message can be seen in the characters. Taki is an active, masculine boy who lives in the city, representing modernity and the future. Mitsuha is a passive, spiritual, feminine girl who lives in the village, representing tradition and the past. When they exchange bodies, the opposites complement each other, creating a balance that not only helps them function better in their lives, but will later help them save the lives of many people. But before that, a special day came. Taki wakes up in Mitsuha's body, and she accompanies her little sister and grandmother to the altar of a god called Musubi to leave the offering of the sake they made at the beginning when they danced on the traditional dance. On their way to climb the mountain, Taki didn't hesitate to carry grandmother, and she explains to them about Musubi, which means to tie threads, to connect people. Threads represent the flow of time. They converge and take shape, twist and tremble. Sometimes they untie, break, and then come back together. She also adds that when someone ingests something, there is also a union. They finished climbing the mountain. That's when Taki noticed that God Musubi's body was a huge crater. Upon descending, they reached a river. Grandma said that after that, it was the underworld. That meant that to return to the earthly world, you had to leave what was more valuable to you. They arrive at the shrine, and Taki leaves Mitsuha's sake as an offering. Later, the long-awaited day arrives when the comet will be seen all over the world. However, at that moment, grandmother asked something. "Mitsuha, are you dreaming?" This made Taki wake up in his original body abruptly with tears in his face. However, he doesn't know why and realizes the date Mitsuha arranged for her with his superior Okudera. So he runs off, but the date doesn't go well either, since Taki treats her very differently. His mind is foggy. It seems he has feelings for Mitsuha. Taki didn't have the best date. He didn't even know what to say. Although upon seeing a photograph of the town Itomori at the museum, he couldn't help but feel like he'd been there before. Putting that aside, at the end of the afternoon, Okudera mentioned to Taki that he seemed like a different person. She knew that he had liked her a while back, but she wanted to ask if he liked another girl now. Taki, embarrassed, said there was no one else, so Kudera said goodbye. She would see him at work. Despite what she said, he knew Okudera was right. He liked Mitsuha. After this, Taki read the last diary entry. According to Mitsuha, at the end of the day, the comet could be seen, but Taki couldn't see anything, so he tried to call her, but the call simply wouldn't connect. For her part, Mitsuha is very sad for some reason. Even she cuts her hair. It seems that someone broke her heart. This worried Techi, who wondered if she had done it for a boy. You see, Techi says this because in Japan, it's very common for a girl to cut her hair when a relationship ends. This means leaving the past behind. Disheartened, Mitsuha goes out to see the comet with her friends. Once they reached the top of the hill, they saw the magnificent comet. It was certainly a beautiful sight. However, the asteroid splits in two, and one part falls on the village, killing everyone, including her. But it's strange that in Taki's sky, no comet can be seen. Taki stops hearing from Mitsuha. He wanted to tell Mitsuha what had happened the next time they switched, but for some reason, it didn't happen again, and the calls and messages didn't come through either. Evidently, the following days for our friend were filled with emptiness, and even though he remembered almost nothing about Mitsuha's hometown as he experienced the body changes, he had vague memories of the place like fleeting dreams, which he always drew in his free time. And then he clings to knowing what happened to her, but as memories fade, he doesn't remember Itomori's name. After a week, he couldn't bear the uncertainty any longer. He needed to know what had happened to Mitsuha. So, he got ready, put on his bracelet, and headed to the train station. What he didn't imagine was that Tsukasa and Okudera were waiting for him. The group was surprised that Taki didn't know which village to go to, but without judging him, they began to follow him from village to village. Taki clearly showed off his drawings, but it was useless. No one seemed to recognize the place. As evening fell, the boys decided to stop for lunch. It was there that, by chance, a woman recognized the drawing as Itomori. Taki excitedly asked them to take them to that place, but upon arrival he found only destruction. What was happening was that place was where the comet had hit 3 years ago. Taki remembered the night of the comet, but it seemed impossible. His messages with Mitsuha were only weeks ago. He still had Mitsuha's messages in his diary. At that moment, Mitsuha's entries began to disappear, and Taki didn't understand what was happening. Investigating a little further, our friend learned what had happened in October 2013. A part of the comet had fallen in Itomori, destroying everything and leaving many victims, including Mitsuha Miyamizu. Taki is very confused. He begins to doubt if everything was true. During the night, Okudera mentioned at home that she didn't know whether to believe Taki's story. What she was sure of was that he had met someone and that someone had changed him. Taki, not knowing what to think, came to the conclusion that it had all been a dream. He only recognized Itomori because he had seen it on the news 3 years ago. At that moment, something also happened. Taki couldn't even remember Mitsuha's name. Okudera mentioned that Itomori's braided ropes were pretty. Perhaps his bracelet was from there. Taki replied that he sometimes wore it as a lucky charm, although he didn't remember who had given it to him. It was on a train. This made Taki remember that someone had told him that threads twist, tangle, untangle, and reconnect. That was time itself, perhaps. That was the answer. He remembers the shrine he went to with Mitsuha's grandmother and decides to go alone to find it. And our friend was heading towards Musubi's body, even though it was raining. After several kilometers, he finally saw the crater. Where he had been wasn't a dream. Everything was true. What happens is that there is a 3-year difference between their timelines. Taki's life is 3 years in the future of Mitsuha's life. Yes, Mitsuha lived in 2013. Taki is in 2016. That's why Taki didn't see any comets, because that happened in the past. Then, Taki enters the shrine and discovers that Mitsuha's offering he left is still there. Although their times have become entangled, the boy drinks the gift that contains half of Mitsuha's soul. In doing so, when he got up, he fell. Seeing how the comet was drawn on the ceiling of the cave, from the comet, a thread emerged that began to spin, tangling, unraveling, and rejoining. This thread went from Taki's bracelet to Mitsuha's life. He has a vision where he sees the girl's life story, from her birth to her story with him. There, it is seen that when her mother, Futaba, lived with her and her father, Toshiki was different. He was a loving father, but everything changed when her mother passed away. He loved her so much that he was deeply saddened, so he chose to avoid everything that reminded him of her. He abandoned his family and his traditions, the reason why grandmother took care of them here. Taki also saw something. Mitsuha had gone to Tokyo, but when she returned, she came back sadly, which is why she cut her hair, and at the end of the night. The comet fell on her at that moment. Taki woke up in the girl's body on the day of the asteroid impact. She was still alive and he hugged her, beginning to cry. Our connection with others transcends the dimensions of time and space, and of life and death. However, upon seeing her, the grandmother knew it wasn't her granddaughter. With this in mind, she reveals that all the women in her lineage also experienced something similar. When she was young, she also changed bodies when she dreamed, although she had forgotten who it was with. In fact, Mitsuka's mother did it too. She recommended that she cherish those moments, since upon waking, most things were forgotten. Upon hearing this, Taki said the impact would be so great. The old woman didn't believe her. Taki proceeds to tell everyone he can about what will happen, but the only ones who believe him are Mitsuha's 2 friends. Then they plan something drastic: cause an explosion to set off the town's alarms and send a message over the loudspeakers to evacuate everyone to the school, which will be out of the range of the comet. Immediately, Taki goes to Mitsuha's father, the mayor, to ask for help with the plan, but he thinks she's crazy and that the dementia comes from his wife's family. Upon hearing this, Taki becomes enraged and grabs him by the tie, and Toshiki seems to know something because he asks, "Who are you?" Let's remember that Mitsuha's mother also had the ability to connect with random people, so it's likely that Toshiki knew about the body swap and that he was Futaba's soulmate. But by abandoning and rejecting everything related to his wife, he can't re-establish a connection with her, unlike Taki, who clung to maintaining his connection with Mitsuha even after her death. This tells us that true death is forgetting, and the way to not forget is by remembering, maintaining a connection with the past. Death does not disconnect, oblivion does. The same applies to the traditions and teachings of the past. Over time, we forget or dismiss their warnings. The comet had already disappeared thousands of years before, and people simply ignored it. It was only thanks to their connection to the past that they were able to save people in the present and enable a future. After being rejected by her father, Taki meets Mitsuha's little sister, urging her to run away because otherwise they will die. The girl is confused. She tells tells him that she notices him strange and asks why she went to Tokyo yesterday. It was then that he remembered something, you see. The day before, Mitsuha had taken a train to Tokyo to see Taki because she developed feelings for him. She didn't know if showing up without warning would bother him or surprise him, but she did anyway. The problem was that the messages and calls weren't coming in. Not knowing what to do, she walked and walked, hoping that her presence wouldn't bother him and that it wouldn't be uncomfortable. However, as the hours passed and despite traveling half the city, she couldn't find him. She knew they didn't remember each other well, but one thing was certain: if they saw each other, they would know it was them. After all, he had been in her body and she had been in his. So, with sore feet and about to give up, our friend saw a young Taki. In a hurry, our friend approached Taki. "It's me. Don't you remember me?" Taki, of course, didn't recognize her. Our friend, embarrassed, got off the train, ready to leave. Taki felt an impulse immediately asking for her name. Without hesitation, she threw her ribbon at him. Her name was Mitsuha. She threw her red hairband at him, the same one Taki had been wearing on his hand for years, and forgot who gave it to him. That time, Taki didn't recognize her because that Taki was from past, 3 years before, so he hadn't yet experienced the body swap. But Mitsuha didn't know this, so she returned to her village with a broken heart, and because of this, she asked her grandmother to cut her hair. Mitsuha's red ribbon is related to the myth of the red thread of destiny, which suggests that we are all connected by an invisible red thread that one of the people who are destined to meet, regardless of distance or time. This thread can tangle, stretch, but never break. We can also interpret body swapping as entering the most intimate details of each other's lives. When you let someone into your life, you give them a part of yourself. This can also lead to the red ribbon. This is part of Mitsuha's identity, and by giving it to Taki, she gives a part of herself. And when Taki decides to wear it, it shows that he accepts Mitsuha, and that is a great message to unite in love. Each of us must open up completely, vulnerable and at the risk of getting hurt, but trusting that the other will accept you and not hurt you. That's how we realize that love isn't just what you do, but what you don't do, and stop doing so as not to hurt the other. Suddenly, Taki remembers that before waking up in Mitsuha's body, he took the sake at the shrine, so because of the exchange, Mitsuha must be in his body there. Then, he runs off toward the mountain and about to reach twilight. That moment, when day and night coexist in perfect harmony, Taki arrived at the crater, shouting to Mitsuha, which the girl surprisingly heard. Desperate, they both began to run. And despite being in different times as they passed each other, the time threads connect, and finally, they see each other face to face, each in their original body. Mitsuha began to cry, while Taki explained that it hadn't been easy, but he had finally found her. He had drunk her offer to the gods. This upset Mitsuha. He also remembered what he always did with his body. He was a pervert. Taki apologized. It was then that Mitsuha saw the bracelet. Our friend returned it to her, explaining that at that time it was impossible for him to recognize her, even though he had kept it for 3 years. There, Taki explains to Mitsuha what she has to do to save the people of Itomori, then tells her to write their names on each other's palms so they don't forget. But when the girl was about to do the same, the twilight was over. Taki hadn't been able to tell Mitsuha that he would look for her wherever she was. Taki slowly begins to forget about Mitsuha. In fact, he didn't even remember why he was there. She carries out the plan, and they manage to evacuate everyone, so they both set the explosives and began to hear calls. Saya had to sound the alarm when the explosion happened. The girl did it. Everyone had to go to Itomori High School. People began to evacuate. Without a doubt, they were succeeding. There was only one problem. Mitsuha no longer remembered Taki's name, but her friend ignored this. Instead, he said they couldn't evacuate everyone. She had to ask her father for help. Mitsuha, without hesitation, began to run. However, she soon noticed that the authorities had discovered Saya, who told everyone not to worry. At that moment, the comet began to break away, which many people noticed. Even 14-year-old Taki, Mitsuha, for her part, began to run faster and faster while trying to remember his name. She knew it was someone dear to her, someone she didn't want to forget. Although, suddenly, in pain and worried, our friend remembered something. Taki had written his name on her hand. The girl immediately looked at him, but didn't say his name. It said, "I love you." This made tears spring to her eyes. She was happy, but she couldn't remember him, and so they both forget each other. Why did Taki do that? A man is meaningless without the memories tied to him. Taki knew that the two of them would eventually forget everything they experienced, and their names would lose meaning. The name Taki, without memories, can mean anything. But I love you means only one thing, that there is a person with a certain name who loves her, and even if she doesn't remember who, knowing that out there is someone who made her vibrate keeps her the dream of meeting again one day alive. The god Musubi, as grandmother explained, it's a god that connects people, is also time itself, which can be entangled and reunited. He allowed this temporary connection between the boys because the Mitsuha's family were the only ones who continued with the traditions. But let's remember that after passing the underworld to return to the earthly world, you must leave what is more valuable for you. Mitsuha's offering was her sake, half of her soul. But if we remember, Taki didn't leave anything of his part. That's why, when the twilight arrived, Musubi took away the most valuable thing for him, his connection with Mitsuha. That's why he immediately woke up crying, same as Mitsuha. They didn't know why, but deep down they felt that they had lost something very valuable. This same thing causes the entries in the diary to be erased. Musubi eliminates any trace of their connection, and if the couple can still remember each other even a little, it's because it continues to unite. 5 years passed, and one day while riding the subway, he noticed a girl with a ribbon. He got off as soon as he could, but the girl wasn't there. The only thing he knew was that he always felt like he was looking for something. This was many job interviews where he always said the same thing. He was an architect because he didn't know when Tokyo could disappear. That's why he wanted to build beautiful landscapes that people could remember, but without success. He met up with his friends who, unlike him, already had offers. Later, he ran into Okudera, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. They caught up. They also talked about the time they had visited Itomori. However, for some reason, they didn't remember much about that time. Maybe they had a disagreement with Taki. That's why they had returned to Tokyo without him. They really didn't know. The only thing Taki was sure of was that after that, he felt extremely attracted to the events of the comet. That's how he learned that most of the inhabitants had survived thanks to an emergency evacuation. At the end of the afternoon, the boys said goodbye. Okudera hoped that, like her, Taki would find someone who would make him happy. Taki ended up at a cafe where he heard Mitsuha's friends talking about their wedding. Our friend recognized the voices, but when he turned around, the couple left. After that, our friend left, and when he ran into a girl with a red ribbon, he felt something, although when he turned around, he only saw that the girl was still walking. That's why he did the same. However, the girl also turned around, watching Taki walk away. The next day seemed like a day like any other, so Taki and Mitsuha left their houses always searching for something or someone, but they don't know what or who, so they took the subway as usual. It was then that their trains crossed. What they had been looking for was right in front of them. As they got off, they quickly looked for each other, but the boys couldn't see each other anywhere. They started running all over the city. That's how they bumped into each other on some stairs. They started walking, but as they passed each other, they didn't speak. This saddened both of them. But, summoning courage, Taki asked Mitsuha if they knew each other. Mitsuha cried. She replied that she felt the same, and without further ado, they both asked for their names. At first, a person's name has no meaning for us, but as you build a relationship with them and feelings arise, their name takes on a new meaning. Someone's name signifies the feelings they evoke in you. There are names in our lives that were initially strange, but after a deep connection, today they mean something to us all over the world. It is important to note that while the red thread or life circumstances bring people together, it is we who write the stories that give value to the names. Stories that begin with the free and brave decision to ask a simple but powerful question. Your name is